Barack Obama talk about we got to work on the deficit, and he said that. He mentioned it when he sent the 30,000 troops to Afghanistan. We have to work on the deficit. Well, he should have told Treasury. He should have. The memo wasn't given to the Treasury. Because that's a huge. If that isn't I'd love to see what the gold chart looks like in the next 4 years.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Everybody thinks that somehow we're going to get out of this, and if you add that to the AIG bailout, 180. If you compare that to the AIG bailout, the bailout of General Motors, the bailout of Chrysler, the bailout of the bank, $700 billion, which none of that went back to the Treasury, the $787 billion stimulus package. Think about that. That is 2 or 3 times more than all those combined.
Yeah. And they're not done.
Oh, and astronomical amounts of money are going to be needed to fund. And forget this. I love this thing about our kids. We're putting all this debt on our kids and grandkids. No, forget that. That's the 80s.
Are we just sheep though, Greg? As people, do we just go along with whatever they tell us, and we just say okay?
I think we do in part, but in part, if you take a look at where most people get their news, they're getting it from ABC, NBC, CNN, and they're great for stuff like the Haiti thing. They're great for stuff like Scott Brown. They're not so. Or if
somebody goes nuts on some campus,
yes.
They're good. They're quick.
They're not great.
Cameras roll, and there they are.
You're correct, and they're not so great on concepting stories. And I wonder, and I'll tell you a story.
Well, and newspapers are going by the wayside too now. You know that.
They are. They can't change fast enough. They have all this other encumberment, paper, trucks, unions. They can't, and they compete against people like you and me.
Yeah. If Woodward and Bernstein today went up to their editors and said, "Hey, we want to spend all this time doing this investigation on the president," it wouldn't happen.
Well, A, they'd tell him, you're right, it's too expensive. And B, they'd say, you want to do what? The president? No, he's got friends. Forget it. No.
Yeah, exactly.
I was on the air on my website in 2008. I had started doing, financial stuff. And really all an investigative reporter is a dot connector. I just connect dots.
You see them. You have the vision to see them.
Well, yes, I just take data and say, wow, this means this. I mean, this has to mean this.
You must ask yourself the question, who benefits when you do this?
I think that the truth is always appropriate in every way, shape, and form. And I think that the little guy, the guy who's thinking, man, I think we had a real estate bottom, I want to buy a house, and he hears this and goes, whoa, wait a minute, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Or I think I'm going to go out and buy a brand new car. Some people ask me, well, do you think people should buy gold? And I always say, well, a lot of people, that's probably not a good idea. They should probably pay their car off, or they should probably go buy, like you had your client on buying food. They should probably, make sure they have money for, other things and pay off all the debt they can so they can, direct their capital to where it needs to go, because their salaries will not go up as fast as inflation. And we won't go from inflation to a little inflation to hyperinflation. We're going to go from a little inflation to a little more, and boom, it's going to be out of control. And
gold is a long-term investment. It's not like instant liquidity.
Well, it isn't long-term investment, and but some people you can't go right now and say, hey, I want to buy a car. Will you take 5 gold coins?
Yeah,
you might be able to do it.
Right.
So for some people, buying gold's a great thing. If you're hedged and you don't have any debt, and you want to diversify your portfolio, and you're going to do some research, that's great.
And you take just 1%, not the whole thing.
Correct.
That's where you get into danger.
The Fannie and Freddie thing, though, is really the biggest story. And I got to tell you, I would be in my boss's offices going, hey, listen, this is an $8 trillion, this is mass audience appeal. This is going to affect every dollar everybody has. This is a cinch for inflation. There's no way this isn't.
3 million foreclosures in 2009. I think it's going to be higher in 10. What about 11 and 12, Greg?
I default back to that Credit Suisse chart. I think that if you take a look at that chart, do you have your browser open? It's right at the top of the Fannie, Freddie, and Gold thing.
Sure do.
You see that chart?
Yep.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. There's a reason why they say that, because take a look at the waves of resets. And the Federal Reserve right now, and this is an official stated policy, they came out with the words quantitative easing. They're buying they're buying toxic debt. And that's why the Treasury's full of toxic. The Federal Reserve's full of a couple $1 trillion worth of toxic, quote unquote, toxic debt. And on the other side, they're taking money and they're having quantitative easing. They're actually buying the 10-year Treasury and to create demand to suppress rates, to keep rates lower. That chart says a lot about the economy. And we're not even talking about the commercial real estate market that Sheila Bair has said on CNBC, and it's on my site like in September of last year, that she said that that commercial real estate problem could cause many more banks to fail. And the FDIC, what a wreck that is. They are beyond broke. They came out in September of last year saying, yeah, we have a negative $8 billion net worth. And they're going around to banks around the country who are FDIC members, which is about every bank, and saying, hey, listen, you know how you guys pay premiums every year? Yeah, we want 3 years of premiums up front right now.
Yeah.
And if that isn't a sad deal, where people think, well, I have $250,000 worth of protection. Well, you do, but I think they're just going to print the money. And will you have $250,000 worth of buying power? That's the question.
So the next couple of years, still a bumpy road, huh?
I think a very bumpy road, and I think this year is a tough road. According to John Williams, we have about $5 trillion to finance this year. That's all the bailouts. That's all the AIG. That's all the stimulus. That's all the TARP money. And on top of that, we have short-term debt rolling over. That's about $5 trillion. And
what do you think the bottom line here, though, is, Greg? These aren't stupid people.
I think they've picked inflation. They're going to devalue the dollar. They're going to try to do it as slow as possible. But if you add up the $5 trillion that we need for financing in 2010, and that didn't count Fannie and Freddie and that debacle. If you count the $5 trillion, 5,000 billion divided by 52, that's $96 billion a week. Each and every week, they need to finance the country.
Where's that going to come from?
That's I think quantitative easing. I think printing money. There's been more than one person, very astute, business and investors people. The sites I read, have said, hey, we think the government's quantitative. The government said it was quantitative easing to the tune of about $300 billion.
Yeah, you link up a lot with one of our experts, Mish Shedlock. A lot.
He's a good one.
Yeah,
he doesn't think there's an immediate danger to the dollar. I think John Williams says there could be, and that if they're not going to have a bond failure, but if the world and China has really stopped buying our bonds, they've really gone south.
They have curtailed that dramatically.
Dramatically, yes. So we have a lot. We have two wars. We have the Fannie and Freddie thing that just got put onto the country. We've got the Democrats are freaking out now because this Scott Brown.
Oh, and they should.
Won.
I mean, this is a dramatic loss for them.
This is Ted Kennedy. I mean, my latest post is about Scott Brown, and I don't pretend to be a great political wit, but I mean, you don't have to be to realize that in the bluest of blue states, Ted Kennedy's seat is now held by a Republican.
Truly amazing. Stay with us, Greg. We're going to come back and take some phone calls with you. Greg's website, usawatchdog.com. I'm George Noory. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, on our next Coast to Coast program, we're going to talk about the ancient maps of the ancients with Charlotte Harris Rees. Get ready for that. Should be fascinating. Secret maps of the ancient world. And when we come right back, we'll take phone calls with investigative reporter and the editor of usawatchdog.com, Greg Hunter, on Coast to Coast AM. Greg, small businesses around the United States are still closing their doors. 10 people, 20 people, 30 people out of work at any given time. This is adding up, isn't it?
It is adding up. And I was on another radio show here on the East Coast, and one of the first questions when they opened the lineup was, how is small business going to get any loans? And the sad thing is, I don't know. I don't see that opening up anytime soon. We've loaned and given these banks all this money. And I think it's very telling that they're not loaning money. I think they're holding their money because I think there's another shoe to drop in the economy. I think the Scott
Brown.
Brown getting elected could take some uncertainty out of the job market, or at least for employers, so they won't, if they do kill health